Hello everyone, welcome back to the workshop and another Sunday video. In today's video I want to talk to you about hollows and rounds and their use and how you would use them. It's not going to be a masterclass video because I'm not a master at hollows and rounds. They're not planes I use a lot. They're not planes I want to use a lot. I've heard it said over the years that you can make any moulding with a hollow and round, and there is some truth to that. Absolutely there is, but can you do everything with them? I would say not, and as we'll go on to show, they're okay. They're not a fix-all, and it's almost always quicker. We'll have a look at the shells behind me in a bit, but it's almost always quicker to use a plane, and actually you get a better result with a plane that is purpose made for that moulding, and that can't be that cannot be understated. Excuse me a second, the puppy appears to be trashing something. I can't understate how much better performing a purpose-built plane is. And that's not to poo-poo hollows and rounds, but they're not the easiest planes to use, and they certainly wouldn't be where I'd be setting a beginner off. It's possible to produce a lot of work with hollows and rounds, and I do use hollows and rounds. I do use them particularly for modifying moulding. The problem is these days is that you need so many specialist planes to go with a set of hollows and rounds, and they are becoming more and more and more expensive. The specialist planes that go with hollows and rounds are becoming so expensive. A set of snipe bills are going to set you back £70 to £100 now. A bit the same with side snipes. Side rounds aren't quite so bad, but if you're going to produce every single moulding, you're going to need those planes. You're also going to need some rebate planes of various sizes and side rebates. That's why I'm not a massive advocate of hollows and rounds. I do have all those planes, and I do have the option of using them. However, you still have to think very differently with hollows and rounds to using, for example, a purpose-built plane. And that's something I want to go on to. I'll say it's not going to be a masterclass video because I would need two people, me to do the work and somebody to film it. But we'll have a good look at hollows and rounds now. Okay, so I've turned the camera around now. We're looking at my everyday planes. Compass planes on the top. Masting and rounding, and there are some planes, the gutter type planes there as well, for various bigger shaping. The three in the middle of that shaft there are nosing planes. Obviously they're the sash filisters, and then there's a vast amount of rebate planes. And then down the bottom, there's a few moulders of different types. Most of these are down here because they need repair. Look, that one on the end there needs a boxing. That's a lovely plane there. Produces a lovely architrave. Yeah, all those planes, those two shells of planes there are there because they need repair work mostly. We then come on to the architrave planes. And then those next three shelves up are all window planes, various types of sash planes. And so are those two shelves there. You then get various panel mouldings, big architraves. That one there, it's a big window mullion. But there's all sorts of mouldings there in the panels and architrave. And the same up there, there's big rounds. Round overs of various different types and different mouldings there. Sort of a bit the same there, there's a few beads on there, a few side beads. some centre beads as well, multi-beads, the panel mouldings there on the end. And then we've got onto beads, side beads, staff beads, whatever you want to call them. Side beads normally is what they should be. But every carpenter and joiner in the land would have had at least half a dozen or a handful of these beads. You often find they're extremely battered planes, and that's because they're the sheer volume of work they've done. And then we come on to my actual hollows and rounds, and there's top shelf, that shelf there, and that shelf there, and that shelf there. So there's 1, 2, 3, there's 4 shelves there, hollows and rounds, and I have repeating sizes. So, and I have repeating sizes so that I can have groups of students using hollows and rounds. So I'm actually at the stage where I need to thin these down. I need to sort out the better planes and sell off some individual pairs. And then we get down here, there's various different beads. And there's some scotias there as well. And then that shelf there that I've just raided is the specialist planes that go with hollows and rounds. And then there's routers and things down there. And again, on all the shelves, on the bottom shelf, there's planes that need repairing on most of the way along. There again, more that need repairing. So on the bench here, we have various different types of hollows and rounds. And hollows and rounds exist in vast numbers. There's hundreds of them out there, which suggests to me that tradesmen probably were using them, weren't necessarily using them to their full advantage, because a lot of what exists are in really good condition. Whereas when we look at the staff beads and the side beads and that sort of thing, these planes, they generally are hard working planes. Whereas the hollows and rounds, you tend to find, like these. Let's pull 4 of these out. These are all owned by the same owner. And they were all made by Mosley & Sons. And they were all owned by Mr. I. Clench. Okay. But they're all in really good condition with really long length irons. That's the other thing that is the giveaway with these hollows and rounds, is that they all have a massive length to their irons, which suggests to me they were not, you see that one is nearly full length. So that suggests to me that these planes were hardly used at all. Okay, the mouths are still nice and tight. The irons are all still good. That is what suggests to me that they were not being used as much as other brands of planes. So if we look at this one here, so this one's a John Hazy. Get it to focus, come on. Okay, this was produced by John Hazy. This is one that I've brought in. It is a plane I use. I do like this plane. See there's a beautiful Thomas Harding stamp, old Thomas Harding stamp there. But these were the years that John Hazy was known to be working. He was known to be working as a plane maker between 1765 and 1785, which makes that an incredibly old plane. But look how long the iron is. Now, you can't tell me that a craftsman paid a lot of money for that plane and wasn't using it hard. And they weren't using them hard. Which is why I think there's so many hollows and rounds out there, because they weren't using them all the time. Okay? All of these period planes, so I've pulled out 4 from my collection that are all of a decent age. And all of them have quite long irons in them. That one's had the back reshaped there. And okay, it's not impossible that they've had new irons fitted. I'm not totally sure they have though. That one's a Nelson. Okay, it's not as old as the Hazy, but it's old. And these two, I'm not sure who the maker are on these, but they are quite old planes also. So, with that being said, you know that there are a lot of really smart hollows and rounds out there. These are a pair of Cox and Luckman. These are bigger planes. Lovely Cox and Luckman planes with the trademark on. These have been owned by a couple of owners, as evidenced by DG and RJ Williams. Again, look how much length is left on the irons. So much length left on these irons, it's untrue. So they weren't being hammered. Let's find an old staff bead. Here then is a good example of what I mean. This one is a Sims, London. Okay, lovely old plane. And look how much down from that shoulder that plane is. And that plane's not set yet. That plane would come down a bit more. And then this one's an even better example. This is a Perth made by D. Malak. And look how much wear has gone off that iron. And this is what I'm saying about beads having done a hell of a lot more work than the hollows and rounds. So what do we need to make a moulding with hollows and rounds? Well, obviously you need your pair of hollows and rounds, and you need various sizes for what you're doing. And you may not use, so these are size 12s. You may not use the size 12 round with the size 12 hollow. You also then are going to need some rebate planes. Okay, these are just two I've pulled off the shelf randomly. This one I can't read the maker's mark on, and this one's is an Cox. Again, quite an old plane. Again, look, good examples on both of these. Look how much has been chewed off those irons through sharpening. These are planes that are being used all the time and being used a lot. Okay, both skew mouths. That one has had an iron sole added, but there was a lot of damage on that iron sole. This puppy's been testing today, people. It's now got a screwdriver it thinks is a good idea. So yeah, the rebate planes are essential, as are these planes here. Now these two, when I brought them, were bolted together, as evidenced by the two holes through them. I don't know what they were doing with them bolted together. They were bolted together like that. And these are side rounds, so they only have a cutting edge. See the shape of the sole, they only have a cutting edge on this side of the round. And there's just sometimes you can't get a round plane into the right place. You need a set of side rounds. We then have again cutting on the inside edge. So cutting on this edge here. We have a pair of what are called side snipes. So these have a plane, they're called snipe bills. These are side snipes, so the base of the plane is the same shape as the snipe bill plane, but they're cutting on this side, and this edge is completely dull. This one is completely rounded over, you can see it on that one. It's literally only this edge that's sharpened on a side snipe. You then have your snipe bill planes. This one's a lovely one by Crow. This one's a lovely one. This is one I use a lot if I'm using a snipe bill. I then have picked up these pair of planes here, but what wasn't disclosed about these, I'm not quite totally sure who the maker of these are, but it's not easy to see. But what wasn't disclosed was that there are actually, the boxing is broken here. So I need to repair this plane and get this boxing back into working order. Again, as you can see, they're cutting on this bottom edge. Okay, so these both need repair work. So, and then, as I say, you need your hollows and rounds. So what would we do with a standard set of hollows and rounds? Well, you would add you'd have to add a fence of some description. Because none of these planes are fenced. And then if we were going to start with a quirk moulding, we would then start on our fence. Now, you'll see I have just allowed that to run past. Right. You would then take, you may then take your rebate plane. How good that one is. Let me just find a sharp one. Or you might take your rebate plane. And you might put in a rebate like that. And then you may come back and do the same thing again. Put a rebate in there as a second rebate, but maybe half the depth of the previous rebate. And all will become clear with that in just a second. Okay, so now you've got a stepped double rebate. You've got a rebate here and a rebate here. Both got nice, tidy, crisp shoulders. You then may take a small hollow and round. You may decide that you're going to round off this corner here. You then may need to hollow out the next one. And this is where the rebate's important. And I would actually normally use fences to my advantage in this situation, because I'm actually just using the rebates that I've struck by hand. Okay. And then you may decide on this one that you want to just round it out. So I've now got the plane stood upright. You can see I'm referencing it with my fingers as much as I can. Now I'm just tilting the plane to get a slightly different shape. And then if we take that block off, we would take a slightly larger round, if I've got one sharp. This one's a Benjamin Froggatt. And this is where it becomes difficult to stop the corners digging on these planes. Where was the round? Or you may decide you're going to come in now with a bigger round. And you might just want to take a bit more out. And this is where like I say, I'm not the biggest fan of hollows and rounds, but it is very much a case of you need to experiment with them, you need to fiddle with them. Okay, So that's no real particular moulding. We'll lob this off now and we'll have another go. You know, you see there the sort of shapes I'm getting. You've got a nice scotia in there. You've got sort of an OG, but you get this lovely quirk. So with the previous moulding, as I said, it was just a let's see roughly what we can produce. And again, that's what we got. Okay, which isn't that far from a Grecian moulding exactly. This time we'll go a bit more scientific. So I'll put the fence back on for the snipe bill, and I've picked off a rebate plane off the shelf that's sort of set. So somewhere near something like a deck go on. Now because I'm planing a short bit, I am planing from one end to the other. If I was planing a long bit, I would plane in short strokes like this, as you all know. Lovely planing piece of pine this is, where it's come from. But it was a piece of, it was on an old bench top, and so it's a rescue piece. Okay, so we've done a front rebate now. Good and deep this time. Let's see what we can produce this time. So we'll start again. And you'll notice that the fence doesn't need to be the full length of the work. Oh, that's annoying. Just found a pin there, I'm afraid. Yep. Unfortunately, the nail from my fence has bent over. Try that again. That's annoying. There you go, it happens to all of us. And yeah, you'll notice the fence is not full length. So as long as I can keep a third of the plane against that fence, either the front or the back of it, while I get that groove running, it really doesn't matter. And again, I'm going to cut this one down until it stops. Okay, that's enough. Right, so that's enough with the snipe bill. We're going to pop this off now. You see these rose-headed nails? They pull out because they are tapered. They pull out so nicely in this situation. But for clenching work, they are the bee's knees. Now, one of these, I've got a side rebate. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in, and I've got a little bit of torn out grain. Where that nail was. Right. So, what we're going to do now? Well, we're going to have a go at rounding that over and bringing it down now. And these kind of OG mouldings are really where hollows and rounds really do excel. If you need, 10 foot of OG moulding, I wouldn't have a problem with using hollows and rounds to make it. And it's not that hollows and rounds weren't used, it's that they weren't used as much as other types of planes. They are perfectly practical planes, and I'll show you now what we've got. A bit more just there. And if I'd been a bit more scientific and laid a shape out beforehand, so be it, but I didn't. Right, let's take that off the bench now quickly, so I can show you guys where we're at with it. And as I say, the first moulding was a let's just see what happens. This is a bit more scientific. Okay, so now we've got the rebate here. That's our original rebate that we ploughed. And this is, if we clean that out, this is the quirk that we produced with the snipe bill and the side snipe. So the snipe bill was cutting this side, but also cutting down. I just dropped the side snipe bill, the side snipe in. There's too many snipe bills today. So I just then dropped the snipe bill in just to clean this face of this rebate, because it was a bit ragged, and you can see there where the nail bent over and gone down under. Okay. So now we want to blend the two transitions. We've got this lovely big bead with this quirk. And then we can either now, we could take a normal beading plane and we could add a staff bead or a bead here, or we could add a hollow there with the hollow plane. Okay, or with a round bottom plane, sorry. Again, I'm using the previous work to reference my edge. Okay, and then you might just want to come in then with a side round and just blend the two in wherever my side rounds have gone. Okay, so that gets us a moulding that is of now a different shape again. And we now have a big bead with this lovely sloped runoff. We could then still add a bead to the end of that. This is not exactly something you see often, but we can now add a small staff bead to that work, a side bead. And we could leave that as it is now with its quirk, if we so wish. We could leave that with its quirk if we wanted to. Or we could actually open that out now. Again with this. So what I would go in there with now is a round to start with. to take it down behind the bead. And they're referencing off the bead. Okay, which gets us something slightly different again. And we just now have to blend with a scraper. I've got the bead set not over, the bead plane I used wasn't set overly deep because it's actually set for another project. We have the bead and we have this blend now. But what we could do now is actually blend the two together and bring this off the bead up and over the top. We'll try that now. And often with hollows and rounds, it's about how you approach the work. So you don't want to always be planing on the same, like rigidly set, often with hollows and rounds. It's about blending work. Okay. About blending your transitions, and it's about just, making things work as you need them to work to get the result you want to get. It's not always about just rigidly holding a plane. They're not overly well fenced, some of these hollows and rounds. They're not over, they're not absolutely amazing, some of them. Right, so that's blended now to a moulding that you could put on a wall. You could put it on a panel mould now. Okay, so that's blended now into a beautiful moulding. Okay. That is what we do with hollows and rounds. So it's not a masterclass, it's far from masterclass. I'd use a nicer piece of timber to start with. It planes okay, it planes off okay, but it doesn't finish. See there, it doesn't finish particularly great off the planes. I would now just come in with a swan neck scraper and take that little line out that's been left by the round plane, hollow plane, depending on which side of the pond you are, by this plane. Okay, by this plane. Now, it is important, it is vastly important, that these come down to a sharp point here. Because there's times where you need to get in and you need these to be cut in. I've heard people say, well, we blend them, we do all sorts. Try not to. Unless you've got two sets, don't do it. See there, you come down to a nice sharp point. That's what you want. That's what you need. because there's times when you want to, like when I was doing the bead to start off with, you want to be cutting wood with these corners. And that is just what leaves that slight track line, ever so slight track line. There, that's where it's been at, you can see there, it's been at that angle and it's just taken a bit of wood with it here. But a cabinet scraper will take that out, or even possibly another pass with the round. Let me screw that. Let's just take another pass with the round plane and let's just see if we can't just take that out. The trick is to take it out without creating another track line somewhere else, which is why I would tend to come back with the cabinet scraper. See, so now, taking the tram line out there, see it's changed the shape here. And that's why I would come in with the cabinet scraper and just remove that last bit of waste with the cab scraper. I hope you're all seeing that there's no need for extra mass on these planes. They're only small light planes. They don't need anything more. There's no need to start adding things to them to make them, you know, yeah, sometimes you get a bit of tricky grain where you just have to push through it. Okay, so that is what I would do with hollows and rounds to produce a moulding like this. And as I say, it is possible to produce a lot of mouldings with hollows and rounds. They are very good planes. And I don't want to give the impression I think they're not, because they are bloody good planes. They get you out of trouble planes. However, they take a bit more thought, well, they take a lot more thought than just, for example, picking up a plane that's ready to go in a similar pattern to that moulding. I have one somewhere. This is a lot bigger than the one I've got, but there's one there. So this plane would produce a similar sort of moulding, not quite the same, but a similar sort of moulding straight off. Okay, so that, you know, that's going to produce the same sort of width of moulding, slightly wider. You see there, look. Okay, it's tipped out. My one is tipped over a bit more. That would be working there like that. Like that. But that is going to produce a very similar sort of moulding, just not quite as deep here. And I only went so deep because that's what my rebate plane was set to. But actually, when you look at it, the actual very low is very similar, it's just on a slightly different angle. So that's what you get with hollows and rounds, guys. And don't be afraid to use them. I would, if I was matching a moulding, I would actually draw out my moulding on the end here. I would draw that out to a specific pattern, and I would actually pull my lines along for both my rebates and then my transition lines, so I know where I've got to cut. Other than that, it's very much what you've just seen there. You do, however, you are going to need your specialist planes, because you can't cut this quirk in. Can't cut this quirk here without a snipe bill. And you see there, if we take that and we take that, you can see they're very, very similar. And that's because this is designed to produce this element of this moulding here. So you cannot produce anything with a quirk without these, if you're going to use hollows and rounds. But by all means do, you know, hollows and rounds are some of the cheapest moulding planes to buy. I wouldn't say everybody needs a set, but if they come up, buy yourself a couple of pairs and experiment with them. You don't need a full set. I've virtually got from 2 to 20, and I've got at least one of each set in between. I have got a one somewhere, and I've got pretty much every size in between now. The even sizes seem to be easier to find, so 2 to 20. The odd sizes, for whatever reason, seem to be very difficult. Well, they're not very difficult to find, but they're more difficult to find. But that's all I've got to say on hollows and rounds, guys. For now, I will make a really in-depth video where we make a copy of this moulding off this big plane, both with this plane and with hollows and rounds, because this is the sort of moulding they lend themselves to really well. And we'll look at that, and we'll look at how I would go about doing that and how we produce this moulding. And you'll see the difference between just running it straight off this plane and producing it with hollows and rounds. But that's it for today's videos, guys. If you could please like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. And also, if you make sure you've actually hit the little bell, the notifications icon, and make sure that's switched on, it does help my channel grow massively. Get in there now, guys. I have had the notifications say I've done 4,000 watch hours. I need quite a few more subscribers to get fully ad revenue monetized, and that is what it's all about, because the quicker I get to that point and the quicker YouTube starts making me an income, the more I've got to spend on camera kit and on microphones and on time to actually make videos. So we're currently sweltering here in the UK in 30 odd degrees heat, so that hence is why I've made this little video today, because nobody wants to come out and help me make videos. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.